Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Office Add-ins Developer Community Call. We've got a fair amount to cover today, so let's just jump right into it. On the agenda for today, we're going to talk about some new runtime options that you can use for your Office add-in. We also are going to chat about the item send event in Outlook add-ins, and also some new API updates for Excel. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. And if you have questions as we go along, just post them in the chat window. There's folks on the call watching, and we will answer those as we go along. And then we'll check at the end. If there's any questions we're unable to get to today, we will post a blog summary in the next few days with all the questions and answers from this call there. Okay, so your presenters for today, my name is David Chesnut. I'm a dev writer on the Office Extensibility team. Actually, everybody here is from the Office Extensibility team today. Also joining me is Alex Jerbeck, who's a dev writer, Jeremy, who's a senior program manager working on runtime features, and Juan is a senior program manager on Outlook, and Ruoying is a senior program manager on Excel. So let's go ahead and jump into our first topic, which will be covering some new runtime options for your add-in. And Jeremy?
Good morning. Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. So I'm excited to tell you today about a new feature that we're introducing for Excel add-ins that will enable our developer community with some new scenarios that folks have shown a lot of interest in. You'll now be able to seamlessly build solutions that work across the task pane, custom functions, and ribbon commands. Some of the common scenarios we've heard include things like sharing variables in state, or connecting with existing auth systems using HTTP only in cores, performing some type of action when your workbook opens, such as authenticating, refreshing data, or customizing the ribbon, or preloading data and maintaining state separately from when your task pane is actually visible. So in the current runtime architecture, each part of your add-in runs in separate runtimes. As you can see in the diagram there on the screen, we have a browser-based runtime for the task pane, and a DOM-less JavaScript-only runtime for your add-in commands and custom functions. Each of these are separated from each other, and we've heard from a lot of developers that this makes it difficult to build an integrated experience that takes advantage of all of these different surfaces to build a cohesive add-in. So we're introducing a new feature today that will make that a lot easier. Today, we'll make it possible for you to enable your add-in to run in a single shared browser-based runtime. So with this new model, that means that your task pane, custom function, and ribbon commands can more work closely together. For a demo of that, I'll turn it over to David to walk through a new PNP that will show that in action.
Thanks, Jeremy. Okay, so we have a PNP sample that we put out on the PNP repo that goes through a scenario of this Contoso data add-in. And the idea is like, this is an add-in that helps you import and work with data. And you can notice that on the ribbon, already some of these buttons are enabled and some are disabled. So this is showing the new feature where you can enable or disable buttons. And it's a contextual UI. So like if I connect to my service from my task pane here, so I can close the task pane, I can open the task pane. I enjoyed working on this sample because these are like really cool features. So I can go connect to my service and it pops up a dialog asking which service I want to use. So I'll just say shared CSV file. There aren't actually any services. This is just mock data, just to kind of show how this might work with these APIs. And then once it's connected, you can see that everything was updated. Now these buttons are enabled. So like I can insert data from that service and it goes and grabs some mock data and puts it in there. And then I can work with that data, like I can select values and say sum them, and it puts a value out there what the sum is. I can also work with custom functions. So what this button does here is it will insert a custom function that filters to just this category. So if I want groceries and I click on this, it puts in a custom function here that gets those. And because all of this is running in the same runtime, it's all sharing the same state. So for example, if I disconnect from my service, the task pane will be aware of that, as well as the ribbon. And also, if I refresh this custom function, it will also see, oh, hey, I'm not connected anymore. I can't see the data, so it's not available. And then if I go reconnect to my service and refresh, now it'll see, because there's a global state variable that's been updated, you can see that change, and now it's working. So before you'd have to use like a storage API to try to share data. It was a little clunky, but now everything's just in the same runtime, so it's much simpler to do this. And custom functions can also access, like the DOM and cores and things like that. One other thing this can do is it can load on doc open, and what this will do, if I enable that, the next time I open this spreadsheet, it'll load the add-in. The add-in will start running right away, and it will register an event handler for the sum button so that when I move in here, it'll work. Now, unfortunately, this morning, there's some kind of new bug that popped up in the sample, so it's not actually working right now. If I close this and reopen it, it'll still think it's not enabled. So that's something I'll be working on today to get that fixed. But I will show you the code that makes that work. Speaking of that, let's just go take a look. All right, so going into the manifest for this project, one of the things you need to do is just set your runtime with this runtime element, and it'll point to the URL, which is going to be essentially your task pane HTML page to load, and then you want to set the lifetime to long. And one thing, I should point this out too. Let me go back to that sample. If I'm closing the task pane, all it's doing is hiding the task pane. So when I open the task pane, it remembers its state. It's not like the add-in gets shut down, which was the old behavior. So everything's still running, which is really nice. So you set the lifetime to long, which keeps your add-in operational even when the task pane is closed. And then for the buttons, you create one of these controls for each one, and there's this new enabled element that you can put in there. So in this case, it says false. The default is true. If it's not there, then it assumes it's enabled. But in this case, when the add-in first starts, I want that to be disabled, so I set it to false on all of those buttons. Now you can programmatically set it to, and the way that works for the ribbon is in here. So basically, if you open the sample, the Office API's helpers is pretty much where all the core API stuff is that you need. So the update ribbon, we'll call this Office Runtime UI get ribbon, and then it'll say then do a ribbon request update. And you pass in this JSON description of all the buttons that are there, and you indicate, are they enabled or disabled? You set to true or false. And right now, it just tracks it through this global variable. It says, is it connected? Is the sum button enabled? And things like this, in terms of how to determine what's enabled or not enabled. So anytime you want to update the ribbon, you just call this request update, pass it to JSON description, and whether or not the buttons are enabled or not. Now, at the moment, this is an older API to call it. This is actually different in the DTS file. Once that, I'm just waiting for that change to go out and show up on Insiders. And once that's out, I'll update this to the current API. It's just slightly different is all than this one. So it's the fun of being in preview is you got to track little minor changes as they happen. Let's see. Now to show or hide the task pane, there's a set runtime visible helper API. And basically, you're just going to call office.addin.show as task pane, which will display the task pane, or you're going to call office addin.hide, and that'll hide it. So it's pretty simple. Then in terms of setting the startup behavior API, you want to call this office addin.set startup behavior, and then you pass it the value that you want. So if you set it to the startup behavior.load, that says, next time the document opens, I want my addin to start running. And what will happen is your Office initialize will get called right away. And then you can start doing any processing that you need right on the document open. If you don't want that behavior, you can set it to none. And then basically the add-in will start running whenever it's needed. So like say someone opens the task pane, for example. So it's more of a delayed start, I guess. Now for the globals, there's this get global function, which basically is returning the window object from the DOM. And there's, let's see, let's go down here. This is where the state gets initialized. And right now I'm just creating this g.state object, which tracks, is it initialized? are restarting when the document opens. And this is how it knows like which buttons to enable or disable. So this is basically the context of the add-in. Anytime something changes, the state gets updated, and all parts of the add-in can see this. So the custom functions can access this, the task pane can access this, the buttons can access this, and it's consistent across them all. Let's see. Oh, there's the table change event. So when the initialize is called, let's see, office.initialize. So say this was configured to start on doc open, then it's going to call this monitor sheet changes, which adds a table on selection change event. And this is how that table was detecting, like if I'm outside the table here, you'll see the sum button is disabled. And then when I'm inside, well, yes, there it goes. It's a little delayed. The sum button gets enabled again. So it's monitoring that event, and that event gets wired up on office.initialize. So if this has been configured to load on doc open, then that button will start working right away without the task pane having to be opened. And so this is where that happens, where it gets wired up. And then here's the actual event where it handles it. And then it goes and it updates the button state by calling the update ribbon command. So this is a pretty big sample. There's a lot to dig through in this one. So we're going to break these out into smaller pieces. I mean, you can certainly start. I would definitely say take a look at this, to start with. But there's another one that I hope to have out published today. That's just a simpler kind of get started. All this does is it shares state. There's nothing else going on. So, oh, sorry, it's not Contoso data. This is just like you can give it key values like this. And then you can say, I want to store that into, and I've selected global variables for now. And then in your custom function, you can get it back out. You can say get value for key. And if I get that key value 4, and it goes and it sees that value that was stored in there, you can switch this to local storage if you want to use that. And then inside the code, you can look at how that's actually storing the info, and it's being shared across, through the shared runtime. It's all accessing the same state. So I think that's it on the demo. We'll put the links out there to go take a look at this.
Great. Thanks, David.
Did you want to jump back to this, Jeremy? Okay, thanks.
Sure. Yeah, I see some questions in the chat about availability. So I'm happy to let you know that the shared runtime functionality is available today in Excel as public preview for insiders across Windows, Mac, and the web. So we'd love for you to try it out. Give us your feedback on how we can improve it for GA. There's a link to the docs on the screen there as well. If you want to provide us any feedback, you can do that through our issues page on GitHub.
Cool. Moving on to the Outlook OnSend event with Juan.
All right. Thank you, David. Let me share my screen. All right. Hello, everybody. This is Juan Balmori here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the OnSend event in Outlook. This is a feature that we announced at Ignite last year as available. Since in the monthly channels, since the September update, you should have it ready to use. And for the semi-annual channel, it's going to be ready on the next update by July. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what is the OnSend event. I'm going to talk about the scenarios. My goal on this call is to also share what you can do with this event and trigger some ideas of how can you improve your existing Outlook add-ins, or how can you create new add-ins based on this feature. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how can you implement it in your projects, some important considerations that you need to know for this event. And then I also want to share with you that we are thinking about another feature that we call soft block OnSend, that it's kind of complement to this feature. So let's get started. So what is the OnSend event? So the idea here is that, Outlook developers were asking us to provide an event that they can subscribe to, just when the user sends an email. We're going to get an event when the user is sending either a message or an appointment, and basically you're going to be able to, do some processing on the email before sending it, including blocking the send. So for whatever reason, if you validate that the content of the email is not valid, or the user didn't specify a specific resource or a classification, or the scenarios here are basically infinite. So for whatever reason, you can actually stop the send of the email, and that's why we call it block OnSend. All right. So it's a very simple concept. So the scenarios that we have seen any customers implementing are many. The first one and most popular is email classification. So basically, this is a way of forcing users to classify an email by using an add-in, for instance, tagging it as public, confidential. So that is one scenario. If you don't classify an email, you cannot send it. But there are other scenarios where not necessarily you're validating content, but you are changing the content of the email itself. Like, for example, Egress, which is a partner that we showcased at Ignite last year, we show a demo on how they are actually encrypting email messages. So the idea here is that when you click on send, the user can encrypt not only the body of the email, but also the attachments that are in the email. So it basically you can obviously use this event not with the purpose of just blocking the send, but doing additional tasks before sending it. Validation and compliance is another one. Basically, for example, I don't know, it can be something as simple as if you're creating an appointment. Some companies have some, policies recently that suggest that you shouldn't send a meeting request if it doesn't have an agenda. No? So you can validate if the appointment has an agenda or not, or other, compliance-related features. Like, for example, if you're adding a signature and your signature includes an address and all that. No? So you can validate before sending it. The other scenario that we have seen is modifying third-party backends. This is particularly interesting for meetings. For example, we have many add-ins that are implementing online meetings, like Zoom or like BlueJeans, and when the meeting changes of date or hour, any updates to the meeting needs to be reflected in the backend as well. So you can use the send event to do those updates on third parties. The same is true for meeting boosters. It's a scenario where you're adding, for example, if you order catering to a meeting and you change the date because you want to inform your providers that the meeting was changed, so that the order gets changed as well. And anything else, so these are just a few ideas. And in the image that you see here, I'm going to do a demo in a few seconds, but you can see more or less how this works. So when you're trying to send an email, basically you can use the info bar here to say, to communicate the error to the user that, hey, you're missing to add, a subject in the line, or you can use this to notify the user why the email wasn't sent. So how to do it? So it's quite simple to do. You need to have the item send event. You need to declare it on your manifest. You need to include a function file as well. And the idea is that, the event handler is going to be defining the function file that you specify, and then basically you just implement it. So here's an example of a manifest entry that has an item sent. So within the desktop form factor, in this case, the function file indicates, the JavaScript file that includes the event handler, and then you need an events extension point. You declare here that you want to use the item send event, and then the function execution is going to be synchronous. And this is the method that is going to get called, in this case, validate body, when the item is sent. All right. So let's see a demo of how this works. Let me bring up here. I have, in the interest of time, I have a project. I created this project with Joe Office, and I just augmented a few things to show how to use an OnSend event. As you can see here, this is just a regular Outlook admin manifest. And if you go to, so very important here, we ship the version overrides of the manifest. As you can see here, the 1.1. So it's the OnSend event. The event declarations are part of this override. So you want to make sure that you include that. So that's the number one change you need to do. Then you also need to add a function file. As you can see here, I declared a function file here in commands URL. So basically this points to the commands JavaScript file that I have here. And then you just add the extension point events. You declare here item send event, synchronous, and then the function that I'm going to call, it's called block send. Well, this is just a very simple example of how to use it. If I go to this file, commands.js, what you will see here is that effectively there's a block send method, and this method is, what I'm doing here is super simple. I'm just getting the subject of the email. So when the user clicks on send or updates the item or updates the calendar, I'm going to go to the subject, and if the subject of the email equals don't send, then basically I will cancel the send event. All right? It's pretty straightforward. So now let me show you how that would look like. If I go to Outlook and I create a new email, I already side-loaded my add-in here. And if I want to send an email, I don't know, to my manager, for instance, and I put type don't send on the subject of this email, and I send it, you will see that I have this. It was very quick. It was very fast, but you saw there was some processing going on here. Well, the event kicked in, and I can use the info bar to send a custom message. No, in this case, I cannot send it. Obviously, if I send the subject, if I change the subject to this was a demo, send it, you know, the email is going to be sent. All right, so it's pretty straightforward. And so this is an example of how to implement this. All right. So there are some important considerations when you are doing the OnSend event. First of all, right now, if your add-in is using the item send event, we are not allowing those add-ins to be on the store. So, and the reason for that is because this is a very, I mean, it can be, that's why we are proposing to have a soft block on send feature. This is a very aggressive, could be a very aggressive way of blocking a user from sending email, which is one of the Outlook, you know, core functionalities, right? So for example, if your web app is down for whatever reason, then the add-in is not responsive or whatever. Sending emails in Outlook it's going to be down. So it's for scenarios like this, and this is by design. So this is the scenarios that we have in mind for this feature was like really it's okay if the user cannot send emails if the add-in is not working to validate what's going on here. So that's why if you decide to implement functionalities using this feature, it's super important that your web app is always on, you know. Now you can have only one item send event on the manifest, so you cannot have multiple events being triggered by your add-in. Performance should be a consideration because obviously if you are doing a very expensive operation when you're sending an email, you know, the Outlook experience might suffer of that performance. Now users will maybe complain about, hey, it's taking so much time to send an email and stuff like that. So you want to be super careful about it. There's a timeout, by the way. I don't remember. I think in the docs we have the details, but yeah, you should be very careful of that. And then the other thing here is that there could be multiple add-ins in Outlook that implement the item send event. And in that case, the events are going to be triggered in the order where the add-ins were acquired, in this case. So it's a little bit undeterministic. And right now, we don't have support for, you know, what events should be triggered before others. So it's basically that in the order in which they were installed, that's the order in which the events are going to be triggered, right? So now that feature again is shipped. You can use it today. You'll be able to use it in the semi-annual channel very soon. And of course, we are thinking about other scenarios that are where we want to do some processing while the email is sent, but we don't want to be as aggressive as as what we have right now. No, so that's why you call it soft block on send. And the team right now is working on, this is very early thinking about the feature that we can complement this functionality. And by the way, the reason why I wanted to be here with all of you today is that if you want to participate on the design of this, we would love to hear your feedback, and you can impact the how we design it. I will tell you how you can do this in a few seconds. But basically, we need your help to make it super useful. No? So what is the idea here? So soft block on send is a less aggressive way to process or to handle events when I'm sending an email, when the user is sending an email. We want the user to be in control, of sending the email. Just for instance, today, if you try to send an email with no subject, Outlook is going to pop up a message that says, hey, you really want to send this message with no subject, and then you can send the email or go back to editing and adding a subject. This is something that's similar that we want to do here. As you can see on the image, this is again early design. We want to pop here some actions that the user can take. Obviously there's going to be like a timeout here, a few seconds, but the user can actually just send the email or cancel the sending of the email. So the other important thing here is that Outlook is never going to be blocked from sending emails. So basically, we will never, if your web app is down for whatever reason, Outlook will just send emails. So this is basically going to be used to do like minor validations, no? For example, hey, you didn't add an agenda item to this calendar. Do you want to, you want to add more details about that and stuff, And finally, the other design that we are considering for this feature is that support more granularity of events. Like, for example, right now, the OnSend events, if you declare an item send event in your manifest, the event is going to get triggered both in emails and calendars. But we have heard feedback from customers that, they are only in the calendar business. They only want to handle the event when you're sending a calendar item or with emails. So this is going to give you ways to, the feature that we are designing currently, the idea is that you are going to be able to say, just work for appointments or just for emails or for both, And finally, I think these type of add-ins are going to be allowed because they are, precisely because of these features, we're going to allow them to be on the store, that we're shooting that should be the case, no? Because the user has more control. But anyways, I don't want to take too much of the time of this call with more details here. I just want to have an open invitation. If you are interested on helping us on the design of this, or if you have scenarios that we should be aware of, please email me and I will be happy to have a conversation with you about this. So that's what I have for today, guys. Please use the feature, and if you have any questions, let us know. Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Thanks, Juan. It looked like there might have been a couple questions. Did we address the questions coming up in the chat? I thought I saw someone ask about a timeout, what the timeout value for the event is.
Yeah, there's a question regarding the timeout. We also, how does the user know there is an OnSend add-in registered?
For a timeout, yeah, I'm not sure about the time. It's in the reference. I can follow up with that question after the call. But we do have a timeout for it. What was the other question?
The other question was, how does the user know there's an OnSend add-in registered?
That's a great question. So if you remember my demo, when the user is sending an email, there's like a UI in the info bar below the send button. You will see that processing is going on. That's how the user visually knows that there's an add-in, and actually we will disclose, this add-in is doing some processing before you sending the email. That is the visual that users have to identify that there's an OnSend event going on. Here it says, not being able to send an email backend is down is horrible. Yes, I agree, Dennis, with your statement here that it's horrible. But in some cases, some customers have expressed, that this is so important that they really want to validate the content of the email before it is sent. We did it with that scenario in mind, and of course we are kind of, that's why I was sharing with you the soft block OnSend feature that we want, no? So we also want to have a less aggressive proposal for these types of scenarios. But for all, in some scenarios, this is what's expected, so that's why we have it. All right. Will this work in Outlook in iOS and good question from Juan here. Yes. Well, right now this the OnSend event only works on Windows, Mac, and online, and we are planning to. It's on the backlog to also support it in the mobile platforms. Any plans for allowing OnSend functions to the group? There's a lot of good questions here. OnSend functions to display a task pane. This is something that we are thinking on the new soft block OnSend event. As you can see on my slides, there were some actions that we were displaying on the info bar. And one of those actions could be when you click on it, we open a task pane so that the users can further configure the email, right? So this is definitely something that we are looking to do, and I would love to have a more detailed conversation with you about it if you want. Could the OnSend event show a message toast when, say, the email is processed by the admin? Well, right now, what we are showing is it's very visible is the info bar. There's no way of not showing it, so we will always showing it so the user knows that the admin is doing some processing. So that's the visual thing that we have. If you think we need to do more, I would love to learn more details. Can users disable the add-in? How it will behave? Yes, absolutely. If you can uninstall the add-in if you, I mean, it depends, right? If it's released from corporate deployment, many times the IT department is the one that is kind of controlling the add-ins that the user has. But if you yourself install an add-in that is using OnSend and you want to uninstall it, you can totally, absolutely do it. After send, we don't have yet an after send event in mind, but I would love to talk to you more details about it. The way that you uninstall add-ins, it's we have an in-client store in Outlook. When you click on the store button, and from there you can manage the add-ins that you are installed. Yes. Okay. I think there are more questions. I can, chat here for a few more minutes, and of course, guys, please email me and to have more detailed conversations. Would love to see your scenarios and see how can we help you.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Juan.
Thank you.
Great to see the questions and all the interest out there. So moving along to our next topic, talking about what's new with the Excel JavaScript APIs. So Ruoying, do you want to talk to this? And I'll just go through the slides.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. This is Ruoying. I want to introduce some features related to Excel's custom functions. So the first topic is about the error handling. In the previous David show, it's actually contained a feature that when the add-in cannot connected, then it's logged out, then its custom function shows an error at .na. This is the custom function can return the error, and the error has a specific message. So this is a new feature for custom function. It's the custom function can throw an error, or they can return the error values in an array. So that will enable users, for example, if there's any customized error they want to show to their customers, then they can use this. They can use this mechanism to let their end user know. And the arrows can also customize the message. Although currently, if you return the arrow, this is the Excel built-in arrows, but you can specifically set what's your error message. For example, in the snapshot, you can say this is a stock value, and but it returns the .na, and when user focus on it, the message will show this is no data for this stock. So the user knows what happened, and maybe you can also show your suggest actions to let user to do the further based on that. The next one is the arrows can be set as output. Then you can also we can imagine that when the parameters has arrows as input, currently the custom function will just arrow out if any input contains arrow. But in future, we will support if there are arrows as the expected input for developers. And so you can see you can in the metadata just define which parameter you want to allow arrows, and then if this parameter, no matter it's a one value or array, if this contains values, it will not arrowed out, and developers have the flexibility to handle it by themselves. But if you're already specific this type as like a string or bool, then we are not allowed arrows because you already specific the type. So it only works for the any type. And you can specifically for each parameters. So this is for the arrow handling. Basically, you can use arrows as the output and also the input, and you can specific your arrow message in both time. Play the video to show how this works. So you can see that writing a custom function which will use the arrows in the above row, and then it will detect this is an arrow and then send out a message. And I can also use the array of the arrows as an input, and it can also execute it correctly. So basically, we think this is can fulfill your requirements and your scenarios, which need to handle with different arrows in input. So for custom function, there is a very important feature. The important part is the custom function may need more information than only the parameters value. So if you, for example, you want to know the parameters range, the number formatting or colors, all those things, currently there is no way to do that. But we will provide a way to let you know where those parameters is. For example, if this parameter is located in A1D4, then you can call API in custom functions to get the range and then get all the information you needed. So with this feature, you don't need to store the range information in other place, but directly get it. And that one is not published yet. So if you have any other thought or have questions about that, please feel free to contact us to ask. Previous one is about the custom function can get more information to do the calculation. And then after the custom functions finished, you may need to do the further actions right after the custom function execution. Then we will leverage, we suggest to leverage the uncalculated event. Currently, the uncalculated event will happen once the calculation finished, but there's no way to know if this is which custom function is finished and then do the further action. Now we are adding the features that the uncalculated event will show with the address, which cells calculated. And then this event will be triggered once the custom function finished. I think if you use the custom function before, you know that custom function is async, but it will wait until the execution finished, then return the value. So this is a demo of how this works. This is internal environment, and then I add a custom function into this cell. And then you can see that the B2 is calculated. And I can also click a range. If there's a range of customer function, if the range of cells are calculated, we will merge the cells by columns. So you will not receive like 10 calculated events. You will get one event with a range. And for the streaming custom functions, this is also works. So if this is streaming, you can see like every time it's calculated, you will get one event fired. So with that, you can know when this happened and then leverage API or other features to do your further work. So basically, that's all of the custom functions new updates. If you have any questions or concerns for these new items, please feel free to connect with us in the GitHub or Stack Overflow. We will take a look at it and you can communicate. Is it possible to return value with note? So with your question is you want to not show the arrow, but to show a note to users. So currently, the only way to show this is different than the normal value is arrows. But I got your point. You kind of like a note or a warning or something like that to let user know this is different than a normal value. We will look at that possibility because we should leverage the Excel's existing mechanism. But this is this is a valid requirements we should look at. Thank you all.
Awesome, thank you, Ruoying. So, Alex, do we have any other Q&A out there we need to get to? How are we doing on the questions?
Yeah, there was one general one. Is there a way to toggle an add-in from being loaded or not? For example, if add-in's loaded through a shared catalog, the only way to temporarily unload an add-in is to remove it completely? Question mark. So yeah, is there a way to toggle add-ins from being loaded? And just as a reminder, if we don't get to your question or we missed it while we were going through the presenters, we'll be posting the full Q&A on the follow-up blog after this.
Yeah, absolutely. On that toggle question, was a question about the user. Can you say that again? I didn't quite follow the first part of it.
Sure. It's just, is there a way to toggle an add-in from being loaded or not?
Yeah, on document open, I assume.
Yeah.
I don't know of a way for the user to do it. It'd be good to check with Jeremy on that. I know that programmatically you can turn it on or off, but I don't know of a way for the user to do that. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, we'll look more into that and post a complete answer.
Okay.
Also for Ruoying, we had a question, can the custom function error message include links or like detailed descriptions?
Yeah, we can have a link. We can have a help link to user can click, but the feature is only enabled in Excel Online. Currently, Win32 doesn't support arrow contains link. Yeah, but once the product enabled this feature, we will get enabled automatically.
Excellent.
Cool.
Thank you.
Should we move on from Q&A?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're good to move on, David.
Yeah, I did want to mention there were two questions that came in. I got a notification on them late yesterday, so I didn't have a chance to send them around. They came in on the form that we have, so we'll post answers to those in the blog update once I have a chance to forward those around. And so wrapping things up here. So if you're interested in presenting on this call in the future, we've had customers and partners present on these calls in the past. It's great. It's a great way to share information or best practices you've developed with others. Reach out to us and let us know. You can go to this form at the Office Add-ins Engage and give us a little information about yourself and what topic you'd like to present on, and we'll get in touch with you. And just wanted to say, if you're new to Office Add-ins and you haven't developed with them before, there's some resources here you can go take a look at to get started. So a link to the docs, and on those docs we have 5-minute quick starts, which you can see there's a list of them there that just get you going and building an Office add-in really quickly, so you can kind of take a look at them. You could also download the ScriptLab add-in, which comes with a bunch of samples that you could just run in the context of like Excel or Word, and just play with the code without having to set up a development environment, which is a nice way to start. So definitely go check that out if you're new. There's also developer resources that we encourage for all developers. The Office 365 Developer Program, which will give you a free tenant that you can use to develop and test your Office add-ins. It's highly useful. There's a link to ScriptLab if you want to take a look at samples and snippets that we have for various tasks. There's also a link to the documentation. There's a link to the OpenSpec process if you want to participate in anything that might be under development for the future. Link to custom functions. And if you want to engage with us, if you have questions, we have a Stack Overflow tags for Office.js, Outlook web add-ins. You can ask questions there. The product team goes in to answer, and you can also get answers from the community. We have GitHub issues on the Office.js repo. So if you find a bug or what looks like a bug, please let us know. That's where we track bugs from the community and work to get them resolved. We also have a user voice site. If you have feature requests, suggestions for things you'd like to see, let us know on the user voice site. And you could also send a smile or a frown from inside Office itself. Now, this isn't the only developer community call. We have lots of them. So definitely check these out if these are areas of interest to you. You know, if we have adaptive cards, Microsoft Graph, SharePoint. So, you know, if this is an area you're interested in, definitely go take a look at these calls, and you can get a link to all the upcoming calls at that AKA-MS link at the bottom there. And finally, just to say thank you to everybody for attending the call. We will post a recording of this soon after on the Microsoft 365 Developer YouTube channel, which you can check out there for all the videos that we publish in this space. You can also follow us on Twitter at Microsoft 365 Dev. This community call is the second Wednesday of every month, so the next one coming up will be on April 8th at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you don't already have the invite, you can get it from that link at the bottom. And if you have questions ahead of time, feel free to submit them on the Office add-ins form, and we will take a look at them. If you can get them in like a couple days before the call, I can try to actually get answers ahead of time. So that's it. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you on the next call.